Join us on this episode of History Hunters as we check out sites in Nevada visited by the Donner Party on its doomed 1846 journey to California. Stops include the desert region where caravan leader James Reed killed the teamster, and Rattlesnake Mountain in Reno, where the emigrants camped before being stranded in the Sierras and surviving by cannibalism.
It's June 2019 and Sarah and I are on vacation. It's a chance to check out the famous Emigrant Trail used by pioneers in the 1840s to reach the Virgin Territory of California. We're at a roadside rest on East 80 and we stopped at this area, and about 7 miles southeast of here we just passed by this green area, and it mentions that this is Gravelly Ford where the Donners camped. The Snyder-Reed fight happened here. Apparently Snyder lashed a Reed, he missed and hit Reed's wife, and Reed then killed Snyder. James Reed was a well-to-do furniture maker from Illinois who became a group leader of the 5 families in the Donner-Reed party. His wealth and arrogance, combined with his decision to take the disastrous Hastings cutoff route that delayed the group for weeks, made Reed even more unpopular. On a day of great stress, Reed tried to stop well-liked teamster John Snyder from whipping oxen when his team got entangled with another. A fight escalated and ended when Reed fatally stabbed Snyder in the chest. Snyder was buried on the spot and is there today in an unmarked grave. Reed was banished without food from the wagon train, and his daughter smuggled food to him, enabling him to reach California. Reed later returned to rescue them from being snowed in at Donner Lake. If you can imagine, all these many years later, the old Conestoga wagons traveling right through here and going right through here on the way to California. Now we're just traveling by car, air-conditioned cars, and food in the back, and drinks. It's a shame that people had to endure the hardships that they endured. Roadside markers are notoriously brief and many times wrong, and apparently this one is no exception. After visiting the marker, I read research in the Overland Journal newsletter, making a strong case that Gravelly Ford is not the site of Snyder's murder. Analysis of written records and timing indicates that the murder took place at Iron Point, an area surveyed for the Central Pacific Railroad but later abandoned. The site is 66 miles northwest of our rest stop. The place where the Emigrant Trail went through Iron Point bears all the geographical features that align with the account of a steep sandy hill where the oxen became tangled. In 2011, when 2 specially trained historic human remains detection dogs were introduced to the suspected location of Snyder's body, both independently signaled on the same spot near a pile of rocks.
I'm afraid.
Yes, you probably lost signal because we're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, but satellite radio. Where's the satellite?
Up there somewhere. I just think that pioneers who traveled this route out here at the California Trail, they had to worry about water, food, and we're worried about why we lost our internet connection for the music.
Weather.
Huh?
And weather.
Yes, weather, Indians, crazy stuff. Also, where to go to the bathroom if you think about that.
Clear? Is it clear? Is it clear? Is it clear?
Boy.
I think so. We're going.
Oh, don't go. You're over 80.
I don't
She's
give a
crazy.
shit. Getting real
She's
this
crazy.
dude.
Sarah and I have just come across a great distance from the Winnemucca, Nevada area all the way down the Humboldt River Canyon. I'm here at Donner Park because this is one of the places that the immigrants that came from Midwest out to California via the California Trail stopped in this area, including the Donner Party. The spot was known as a green grassy place where natural springs popped up for about 2 or 3 miles. There were hundreds of wagon trained immigrants who stopped here. The Donner Party was here for about 5 days in October of 1846. Their oxen were able to graze on the lush vegetation here that was made possible by the natural springs in the area. They went up the mountain here and they got hit by the worst snowstorm in California history. Among those who were at this camp location were Patty Reed, daughter of James and Margaret Reed. When the party reached the edge of the Great Salt Lake Desert, the Reeds made the difficult decision to leave most of their belongings behind. The Reed children were told to leave their toys behind, but Patty rescued Dolly from the sand and slipped her into her dress. She carried Dolly with her through the deep snows of the Sierras. After the rescue, Patty brought the doll out in the open. When her mother saw it, she reportedly cried, not because Patty defied her, but out of joy that Patty had a comfort during the ordeal. The Reeds reportedly did not have to resort to cannibalism for survival. Years later, Patty married Frank Lewis and gave birth to 8 children. In 1918, in what would be her final visit to the fateful Donner campsite, Patty Reed is seen here standing next to Nevada Governor Emmett Boyle at left. The group is standing in front of the towering Donner Monument that still stands today. After her husband died, she ran a boarding house where she died in 1923. There was a William Pike, a member of the party, who was accidentally shot and killed in this area. And supposedly his body has been buried in this area. 32-year-old William Pike was the nephew of explorer Zebulon Pike, for whom Colorado's Pikes Peak is named. His accidental death occurred on October 20th when he and brother-in-law William Foster were cleaning a flintlock pistol and it accidentally discharged. For the next 20 minutes, Pike suffered as his 18-year-old wife helplessly watched him die, leaving her to care for their 2 young girls alone. He was buried near the campsite. Later at Donner Lake, William Foster had the dubious distinction of killing Indian guides Luis and Salvador in order to eat their flesh. Right over here is a monument that they've erected. Somebody came up with this pretty harebrained idea that this was not where the Donners actually camped out before heading over the Sierras. We do know that they camped at the base of Rattlesnake Mountain, which is that mountain up there. If they had stayed here, they would have been able to enjoy not only water and a place to rest, but there would have been a lot of game in this area that would have kept them alive for a while. It's really kind of odd to see all the housing around here, the modern housing, to think back that this was a primitive area where the immigrants camped. So one of the things that we observed on the way to Reno was the Humboldt River, which was flowing pretty good. It's June, but keep in mind the Donners were here in October 1846, and the river then was a series of stagnant pools, so water was pretty scarce. Their oxen, I understand, fed on sagebrush and whatever grasses they could find out in the desert. But this marker right here symbolizes that the immigrant Donner camp was here. Upon entering the Truckee Meadows along the Truckee River, thousands of California-bound immigrants turned their wagons southwest to avoid extensive marshes and uncontrolled sloughs. Here at the base of Rattlesnake Mountain, the immigrants established a camp which extended nearly 2 miles to the east and west, 1/2 mile north and south. Numerous local springs furnished quality water, and the protected location of the camp provided an ideal locale for a rest stop after hundreds of grueling miles spent traversing the Humboldt River Valley. Once rested, the immigrants turned west to face their major obstacle, the Sierra Nevada. And of course, we know that the Donners didn't make it because they got trapped in the snowstorm. In October 1846, the ill-fated Donner Party spent 5 days in this area resting and grazing their weary animals. This is a marker that indicates this was part of the Emigrant Trail Truckee River route. I can imagine, in looking up at this hill, that some of the boys from the Donner Party would have scampered up here and played a little bit. I'm going to go up here ways. Looks like there's a trail up Rattlesnake Mountain. And no doubt they probably named it Rattlesnake Mountain because there are rattlesnakes here, which I don't care to find today. If these rocks could talk, what would they say? I keep thinking of a Back to Future moment where they travel back in time or travel into the future. The Donner Party would have had no idea that this subdivision back here with this beautiful park would have existed.
Of course, it looks a lot greener today because of the introduction of wells and irrigation systems, but it was a green spot. When I first learned about the controversy about whether or not the Donners came here and whether or not they were this far south, I did look and see where the river was and didn't see it anywhere nearby. And I thought, well, why would they be here? Because there's no water. But that wasn't the case because there are natural springs nearby. In fact, one of the roads up here is called Spring Road. Gives you an indication that, yes, there were plenty of watering spots here. There's a crag of rocks up here. It's kind of fascinating to think that the pioneers may have scrambled up here to get a view of the valley that they were camping in. Downtown Reno with all of its casinos are up there. There's the Reno airport over here. It's really unfortunate that the Donners didn't stay here in October of 1846 because at the end of the month, by the time they reached the top of the pass, there wasn't enough time to even prepare for the storms that were coming. California was going to be inundated by a massive snowstorm that was really unrivaled in California history. And it was such an early timing for that storm, they thought they could get over to Sacramento before it hit, but that wasn't the case. It'd be really cool to think that maybe they wrote their names on these rocks, but nobody has reported such. It was a pretty common practice for people back in those days to carve their initials or their names in the rocks as they passed by. I know that Register Rock is a place where that has occurred, and there's a number of Register Rocks where people wrote their names on rocks. Also at Independence Rock, there's plenty of carvings. I believe that's up in Wyoming. I know that famous trapper Jim Bridger carved his name into the rocks there in southwestern Wyoming. On his way out to California, James Reed himself engraved his name into a rock and added the date at Big Blue River outside of Marysville, Kansas. I think it's pretty cool that he left his mark, his autograph on the rocks. A lot of people think that's destruction of nature, and perhaps it is, because we don't allow that kind of stuff anymore. Oh man. All right. Whew. This is a cool place. Very cool park. I bet the people around here don't appreciate the history that's involved here.
Chills go up my spine when I think of what horrible fate awaited members of the Donner Party as they were trapped by the snowstorms, unable to move to Sacramento, starving to death. Roughly half of the party did make it, but not before resorting to feasting on the bodies of those who died. As I walked Donner Party Park, I could not help but wonder if I got anywhere close to the grave of William Pike. It is totally conceivable that he is in somebody's backyard beneath a barbecue pit, under the slab of a garage, or underneath a road. As for James Reed, there is no mystery. He and his wife and children all survived. Reed settled in San Jose, where he became a wealthy landowner. In 1861, as 47-year-old Margaret was dying in San Jose, she spoke about a bright light that the curtains could not shut out, and named departed loved ones she was seeing, including friends from the Donner Party. She is buried in San Jose's Oak Hill Cemetery. In 1874, the 73-year-old Reed was bucked off the back of a mule, struck his head, and later died. You'll also find him buried at Oak Hill Memorial Park in San Jose. The Donner Party continues to intrigue the world 172 years later, perhaps because it calls us all to question how far we would go to remain alive.